Lucas was a 22-year-old black man who, despite life's difficulties, carried an inner flame that lit his path. In his final year of law school, he was an example of determination and hope in a neighborhood marked by challenges. His daily routine was a reflection of his dedication. He woke up early to study, spent hours in the library, and dedicated himself intensely to each academic activity. Lucas's days were filled with a relentless pursuit of knowledge. He spent hours poring over books, analyzing cases, studying human rights, and developing arguments that he would one day use to fight injustice. His goal was clear: to become a lawyer and use his training to combat the discrimination and inequality that permeated his community and the world around him. Lucas's family was his pillar of support. His mother, a woman of great strength and resilience, always encouraged him to keep going, even in the most difficult times. She worked hard to provide a better life for Lucas and his siblings, and her pride in her son's progress was evident in every word of encouragement she offered. The neighborhood where Lucas lived was not the most favorable. Violence and racial discrimination were a constant part of everyday life. The police presence in the area was a constant reminder of the racial tensions that plagued the community. For Lucas, these challenges were not only a painful reality, but also a motivation for his future work. He saw each injustice as an impetus for his dream of a more just world. Lucas was respected and admired by his neighbors. His friends and college classmates saw him as an example of perseverance and integrity. His passion for justice was contagious, and he often shared his plans and dreams with those around him, believing that his education and hard work could transform society. Despite the challenging environment, Lucas maintained a positive attitude. He believed that with determination and hard work, he could make a difference. His vision of a better future for his community and himself was what motivated him to keep going, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. This dream of justice was what kept Lucas going day after day, as he navigated the complexities of his upbringing and life in his neighborhood. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was determined to face it with courage and hope, believing that one day, his fight would bring meaningful change to the reality he knew. It was a quiet evening on the university campus, and the library was nearly empty, lit only by the soft glow of computers and reading lamps. Lucas was immersed in his studies, absorbed in the complexities of international law and human rights law. The words on the page seemed to come alive, shaping themselves into arguments and strategies that he hoped to one day use to make a difference. The clock was almost midnight when Lucas closed his book with a sigh of relief. He had finished another article and needed some fresh air before heading home. He grabbed his backpack, which held his books and notes, and got up to leave. The night was cool and quiet, and the campus was quiet, like a peaceful respite from the hustle and bustle of the day. As he walked through the deserted streets of the neighborhood, Lucas reflected on what he had studied. He thought about the injustices he had read about in books and the cases he had analyzed, imagining how he could one day make the difference his community needed. The solitude of the night offered a space for his thoughts, and he felt a deep connection to the ideals that guided him. The walk home was relatively short, but the walk always gave him a moment to relax and process his thoughts. However, that evening, the familiar rhythm was interrupted when a police car began to follow his path. Lucas noticed the presence of the vehicle, but didn't think much of it. It was common to see police patrolling the area, although the fear of being approached was always a shadow in his mind. The car slowed down, and Lucas felt a tightness in his chest. The vehicle stopped beside him, and the driver's window slowly rolled down. A police officer, with a serious and suspicious expression, looked directly at Lucas. "Hey you, what are you doing on this street at this hour?" the police officer asked, his tone thick with suspicion. Lucas stopped and, trying to remain calm, replied, "I'm heading home after studying at the library." The police officer, with an expression that mixed doubt and disdain, continued to stare at Lucas, as if his explanation was not enough. Lucas noticed the critical look and the growing tension in the situation. The neighborhood was already known for its difficult interactions with the police, and although Lucas was used to distrust, he had never faced a situation like this so directly. The police officer ordered Lucas to approach the car, and the young man hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the tension. He knew that his presence in a troubled neighborhood and the late hour were factors that could be used against him. As he walked to the car window, Lucas felt a chill run down his spine, sensing that this night could change the course of his journey. Lucas approached the police car with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The officer, a burly man with a stern expression, got out of the vehicle and stood next to Lucas. The tension in the air was palpable, and the young man felt the weight of the situation increasing with each passing second. "What are you really doing here?" the police officer asked, his voice full of skepticism. "You know it's not common to find someone walking alone at this time of night." Lucas, trying to maintain his composure, replied, "I told you, I'm going home. I spent the night studying and I just want to go home." The police officer seemed not satisfied with the answer and began to inspect Lucas in an invasive manner. "Studying, huh? And what do you have in that backpack?" Lucas was starting to feel uncomfortable with the officer's aggressive tone. "The backpack contains my books and study materials. I'm a law student." The policeman raised an eyebrow, apparently skeptical of the statement. "You're a student? Prove it. Show me what you've got there." With a slightly shaky but firm voice, Lucas opened his backpack and showed his books and notes. "Here are my law books and notebooks. If you want, I can even show you my student ID." The policeman looked at the material with a suspicious expression, as if he expected to find something incriminating hidden among the books. He picked up one of the books and began to leaf through it, while Lucas, increasingly distressed, watched. The humiliation was beginning to weigh on him, and he could feel the heat of shame rising in his face. As the officer searched Lucas's belongings, he began to speak in a more cruel tone. "Don't you think it's suspicious to be walking around alone at this hour? And with books on human rights on top of that? You're preparing for something, aren't you?" Lucas tried to defend himself, explaining that he was just returning home and studying for a future in law, but his words seemed to be met with disdain. "I don't trust you. I never trust people who roam around at night. There could be something more you're doing. Who knows what you're really doing here?" The officer continued to search Lucas aggressively, without any regard for the embarrassment he was causing. The feeling of injustice and powerlessness was overwhelming for Lucas, who felt a mixture of anger and helplessness. The situation seemed to have no end, and the young man began to question his own trust in the system he valued so much. Meanwhile, the police officer continued to ask insinuating and disrespectful questions. Lucas's discomfort grew, and he struggled to maintain his dignity amidst the undignified treatment he was receiving. People passing by on the street looked at the scene, but no one approached to intervene. The tension of the situation reached its peak when the police officer, finally dissatisfied, ordered Lucas to kneel on the sidewalk while he continued the search. Lucas, completely humiliated, complied, his heart beating rapidly as he felt the pain of injustice in every fiber of his being. The cold of the sidewalk seemed to seep into Lucas's bones as he knelt, his mind struggling to process what was happening. The officer continued to ask questions and inspect his belongings, while Lucas felt his humiliation grow with each passing moment. The environment around him, which was normally familiar and welcoming, now seemed like a cruel stage for his degradation. The feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. Lucas knew that any attempt to protest could only make the situation worse. The policeman's voice echoed in his ears, mixed with the distant murmur of passers-by watching the scene. With each look of contempt or murmur of curiosity, Lucas felt the pain of injustice intensify. He fought not to cry, forcing himself to maintain his composure despite the profound embarrassment. "There's nothing wrong here, but I still have to make sure you're not hiding something," the police officer said with a cold edge. He searched Lucas' pockets with merciless rigidity, as if every movement was a declaration of distrust. The young man, with his head lowered, struggled to control his breathing, feeling the humiliation increasingly unbearable. The sidewalk was cold and hard beneath Lucas's knees, and the contrast between the outside environment and the heat of his body only increased the feeling of discomfort. He looked around, trying to find some form of support, but the figures passing by kept their distance, as if afraid to get involved. Time seemed to drag on. Each second seemed like an eternity, and Lucas's indignation was mixed with a deep sense of helplessness. He remembered his mother's encouraging words, trying to hold on to the strength and dignity she had always transmitted to him. But at that moment, the pain of humiliation seemed like an insurmountable barrier. The officer continued to taunt, casting disdainful glances. "Do you think you can just walk around and not be questioned? This is what happens when you behave suspiciously." His tone was thick with disrespect, and each word seemed to be a stab at Lucas's trust in the system. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the police officer decided the search was complete. He stepped back, still looking suspicious, and ordered Lucas to stand up. The young man, his legs numb and his heart heavy, slowly stood up. The police officer still kept a critical eye on him, but he seemed ready to move on. "Go home and don't give me any more reasons to stop you," the police officer said curtly, before getting into his car and driving away. Lucas, still stunned, watched the vehicle drive away, feeling the weight of the humiliation and injustice he had just experienced. He began walking back home, each step heavy and filled with a bitter sense of defeat. The night, which had once seemed peaceful, was now marked by a painful experience that would forever change his perspective on justice and equality. Lucas walked into the house feeling as if he had carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. The silent night seemed to echo the emotional impact of the experience he had just lived through. The humiliation, frustration, and sense of injustice were almost unbearable. He knew he needed to calm down before talking to his mother, who was worried about his delay. His mother, upon seeing him walk through the door, immediately realized something was wrong. Lucas's face was pale, and his posture was tense. "Lucas, what happened?" she asked, her tone full of concern. Lucas hesitated, trying to find the right words to explain what he had experienced. He sat down at the kitchen table, where his mother sat next to him, and began to recount the events of the night. Each word seemed to weigh more heavily as he described the aggressive approach and humiliating search he had endured. "They stopped me on the street, searched me like I was a criminal, and made me kneel on the sidewalk," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "It was a terrible feeling, Mom. I never imagined I would experience it so directly." His mother listened attentively, her gaze filled with sadness and empathy. "My son, I'm so sorry about this. I know you face challenges every day, but I never thought something like this could happen to you," she said, running her hand through Lucas's hair in a gesture of comfort. Lucas tried to compose himself and replied, "I know this is part of what we face here, but the pain of humiliation is something I don't know how to describe. I feel so small and powerless. I know I need to move on, but the experience has affected me deeply." His mother hugged him, offering a comfort that only a mother's love could provide. "You are strong, Lucas, and you know you are fighting for something bigger. Don't let this experience get you down. Use it to fuel your determination." Her words brought some relief, but the experience continued to haunt Lucas. The humiliation of the police stop and the sense of injustice weighed heavily on his mind as he tried to process the situation. The walk to the university now felt like a constant reminder of the stresses he faced in his daily life. In the days that followed, Lucas struggled to get back into his routine. The classes and studies that had once filled him with enthusiasm now seemed like a chore. He felt a new layer of distrust and fear following him, a constant shadow that made him question the effectiveness of his fight for justice. Yet even with the weight of the experience still weighing heavily on him, Lucas decided that he would not let the humiliation defeat him. He knew that his mission was important, and the pain he had felt spurred him on to fight with greater fervor. His mother's words were a constant reminder that his struggle was not in vain, and that his perseverance could, in fact, make a difference. Lucas prepared to face the challenges ahead with renewed determination. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he was ready to continue his journey, transforming pain into strength and using the injustice he had experienced as motivation to fight for a more just and equal world. The days after Lucas's humiliation were marked by a mix of introspection and determination. The experience left a deep scar, but it also ignited a flame of renewed commitment in his heart. He knew he needed to turn his pain into action, and he decided to seek help to better understand his rights and explore how he could use his experience to make a difference. Finally, the day arrived for his meeting with his attorney, Dr. Eduardo Costa, a renowned civil rights advocate in the city. Lucas was anxious, but also hopeful that the meeting would offer some guidance on how to handle the situation and move forward in the fight for justice. "Dr. Costa's office was elegant and welcoming, its walls adorned with diplomas and certificates that reflected years of dedication to justice. When Lucas entered the conference room, he was greeted by a middle-aged man with an attentive gaze and a confident posture. "Hello, Lucas. I'm Dr. Eduardo Costa. I'm glad you could come," the lawyer said, extending his hand in a friendly gesture. "Please have a seat." Lucas sat down and began to recount his experience in detail. He described the police stop, the invasive search, and the humiliation he had felt. Each word seemed to bring up the pain he had tried to bury, but he knew it was important for the lawyer to understand the full extent of the situation. Dr. Costa listened intently, taking notes as Lucas spoke. When Lucas finished, the lawyer leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "What you've been through is, unfortunately, a reality for many people in our society. The good news is that there are ways to address this injustice." Lucas felt a sense of relief when he heard this. "What can I do? What do you recommend?" Dr. Costa explained that there were several possible avenues for seeking justice. He mentioned the possibility of filing a formal complaint against the officer and the importance of documenting every detail of the incident. "It is crucial that you keep a clear record of everything that occurred, including dates, times, and any witnesses who can corroborate your version of events." Lucas nodded, absorbing every word. "What about other actions? How can I use my experience to help improve the situation for other people?" The lawyer smiled, admiring Lucas's determination. "Your experience can serve as a powerful testimony for reforming police practices and raising awareness about racial discrimination. You can get involved in advocacy campaigns, work with civil rights organizations, and share your story to raise awareness." Lucas felt a new sense of purpose blossoming within him. The idea that his experience could contribute to positive change was comforting and inspiring. "I would like to get more involved. I want to use my voice to help fight injustice." Dr. Costa offered guidance on how to get started getting involved with local organizations and campaigns. He also suggested that Lucas prepare for the possibility of facing resistance, but that his perseverance would be key to making a real impact. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of hope for Lucas. He left Dr. Costa's office with a clearer plan for his next steps and a stronger determination than ever. The painful experience he had lived through had now become a catalyst for action and change. As Lucas walked home, he reflected on the impact he could make and the path that lay ahead. He knew the journey would be challenging, but he was prepared to face it with courage and determination, determined to turn pain into strength and injustice into an opportunity to advance a more just and equal world. The impact of the meeting with Dr. Costa was profound for Lucas. He felt a new energy and clarity in his mission. Over the next few weeks, he devoted himself to meticulously documenting every detail of the incident, following his attorney's guidance. Lucas began contacting witnesses, compiling evidence, and preparing his formal complaint against the officer. At the same time, Lucas also began his journey to get involved with civil rights organizations. He attended community meetings and connected with groups dedicated to police reform and supporting victims of abuse of power. With each event, he felt more encouraged and motivated, knowing that he was contributing to a greater cause. The impact of his story began to gain traction. Local media began covering Lucas's case, highlighting the abuse of power and the urgent need for reforms in police practices. Reporters frequently interviewed him, and he began to become an important voice in the fight against injustice. But as the case's visibility grew, so did challenges. Lucas began receiving negative messages and comments from people who questioned his version of events or tried to discredit his experience. Some tried to minimize the impact of what happened or even accused Lucas of exaggerating. This external pressure was hard to bear. Lucas felt the weight of criticism and doubt creeping into his mind. The internal battle between continuing to fight for justice and letting adversity get him down was constant. He felt divided, sometimes unmotivated, and wondered if the effort was worth it. In a moment of reflection, Lucas decided to talk to Dr. Costa again. At the lawyer's office, he expressed his frustrations and doubts. "I thought I was prepared for this, but the pressure and criticism are starting to get to me. I don't know if I should continue." Dr. Costa listened with patience and understanding. "Lucas, the path you have chosen is difficult and requires courage. Criticism and resistance are part of the process. What you are doing is important, and can lead to significant change. It is natural to feel discouraged at times, but remember the positive impact your struggle can have. The lawyer's words gave Lucas a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that despite the hardships, his journey was bringing important issues to light and sparking much-needed conversations about justice and police reform. He decided he wouldn't give up. With renewed determination, Lucas continued to advocate for his cause, facing criticism with a new perspective. He realized that even in the midst of adversity, there was a path to progress and real change. The decision to persevere brought with it a sense of renewed commitment to justice and equality. Lucas was ready to face the challenges ahead and to keep fighting, not only for himself, but for all those facing similar injustices. Lucas's fight was far from over, but he was determined to move forward, turning adversity into a force for change and remaining steadfast in his conviction that, despite the difficulties, working for justice and equality was always valid and necessary.